And we are live. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us again. Dr. Cadero, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Camden, is that your TV? I'm picking up back.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
That's all right. No problem. All right, Camden, I'll let you start. Any updates?
You heard the TV in the background. Looking at some of the key races right now. Right now they're talking about the governors. The New York governor race was a race that was that started to become a close race at the end of it, primarily because, like we were talking about in the last hour, some of the priorities of the voter base were not being addressed, particularly around crime, and they're actually going ahead and starting to point the finger at the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, for bringing up the crime conversation in the first place and then allowing Republicans to take it over. But Kathy Hochul doesn't seem to be bothered by it right now. She is up 66 to 33 right now. Onto the Georgia Senate, 77% of the vote in, and they are virtually tied right now. Raphael Warnock, not even a couple thousand votes ahead of Herschel Walker. They're also talking about some of the House races that have been happening. It looks like Abigail Spanberger might just get out of by the grit of her teeth at 98% of the vote coming in. She was about 5 points behind earlier, but now she is about a point and a half up. It's actually looking really good for the Democrats tonight. The only Democrat that it's not looking good for, aside from South Carolina Democrats, of course, sparing Lisa Ellis. I guess we'll talk about that in a minute. But the only Democrat that's not really looking good for tonight is Stacey Abrams. She has been behind consistently all night with 77% of the vote in. She's about 8 points behind. And Brian Kemp is about 2 points above currently the 51% threshold that he needs to avoid a runoff. So if I had to take a guess at it, before the end of the night, Brian Kemp will be called for the governor of Georgia. And I guess we'll just have to see about the Senate. That they are likely going to run off unless Atlanta really, really came out today.
All right, thank you for that, Camden. I am going to Dr. Darrow. Your,
Yes,
your,
sir.
thought, your thoughts on tonight on some of the races for the night. I know it's still early to call, but definitely want to get some your commentary on South Carolina Democratic Party. Of course, you know they called the race a very watched and Senate race in South Carolina against Representative Kirsten Matthews and the current Senator Tim Scott. That race, I believe, was called at 7:03. Soon after the polls closed, Senator Scott won decisively, and of course, the governorship that was up for grabs. Incumbent Henry McMaster was called. He won with 57% of the vote. Cunningham lost with 42%. And those were at the top of the ticket. We're still in the battle for superintendent of education with Ellen Weaver and Lisa Ellis. That's still pretty tight. Right now, Weaver is the Republican candidate. Weaver is in the lead. And down the other constitutional seats, South Carolina didn't, other than Secretary of State, South Carolina Democrats didn't even bother to run Treasurer, Attorney General, Comptroller General, and Commissioner of Agriculture. Dr. Cadero, what are your thoughts?
You know, I'm probably, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm the first person to decry the notion of we should have hope and we should have faith and everything's going to work out. And in spite of that, I can tell you that I was hoping against hope that things might change, but deep down in my heart, I knew they wouldn't. And so I'm not surprised at all. But what comes to mind, and it's unavoidable for me to not mention this, is that how long do we continue with supporting a party that continues to lose? I mean, the bottom line is that it appears as though elections in South Carolina, particularly on the Democratic side, are really just raising money to lose. And I mean, I'm not a sports fan, but I'll use this analogy, and you sports folks can correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems to me that when a coach has a bad season, first thing they do is drop the coach. And so I'm wondering now, when will we begin to understand that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, you're, as Einstein said, that's the very definition of insanity. So I guess what I'm really saying is I'm not surprised, although I was hoping that it would be otherwise. It was said earlier that South Carolina, particularly South Carolina's African-American Democrats, basically put Joe Biden in the White House. The reason being that until Joe Biden's, as most people will recall, Joe Biden's campaign was pretty much in the crapper until South Carolina, and the endorsement came from Jim Clyburn in South Carolina. And so as a result, where we are now shows the power of African Americans and their vote in South Carolina. So something is amiss. And for the only thing I can think about, and the only thing I think any commentator is going to say, is that you got to look to the leadership. So it's unfortunate. My brothers and sisters in South Carolina who are serious electors, you have to start thinking about the team leadership. And I'm not going to say anything more than that because the votes are not in. And yeah, it's possible that for those people who believe in miracles, it is possible that things could turn around. But we know that what we're seeing now is the same that we've seen in some cases for up to 16 years, in other cases 24 years in terms of statewide offices. And it's a cold red state, and we've got to think of something different in order to come out on top. And that's as basic as I can make it, Michael.
Camden, what is your take as being somebody that was active? I met you a few years back. When I met you, you were passionately active in the Democratic Party, on the statewide level. Since then, we've talked. You've become more of an independent voter. What do you think? In terms of every election cycle, especially in South Carolina, you hear a lot of talk about a lot of Democrats talking about reaching out to millennial voters, young voters, Gen Z. Now, you were one of those voters targeted, and now you're very unpleased, unimpressed with the performance of the South Carolina Democratic Party. What, in your opinion, what are they not doing to reach young voters?
I think I will say that Democrats tonight are definitely exceeding my expectations nationwide. As much as I would love to see Mandela Barnes in the Senate, I could not imagine that he'd be 5 points ahead right now. John Fetterman, I really want to see him in the Senate. I couldn't imagine he'd be 10 points ahead right now, because what I've basically been getting from the Democratic Party, and I think what the polls have been showing, is that the Democrats are very good at telling people what they think their primary issues should be, but not very good at listening to find out what their primary issues very much are. I understand the importance of abortion rights. Even as a gay man, I have sisters and friends and women in my life that are greatly impacted by that. I certainly understand that democracy is under attack. It's not that hard to understand that democracy is under attack when you see several people several thousands of people attacked the United States Capitol. But what is more immediate to me is, am I going to make rent? What is more immediate to me is healthcare costs, food costs, gas prices. And that was what was in the more immediate priority to 51% of America. And Democrats got on the road. They talked abortion. They talked democracy being at stake. Important things, but not the topic of the moment. I was talking earlier about Glenn Youngkin. I think the reason why he's effective as a Republican, and I think the reason why Republicans in South Carolina are effective is because they hit issues that are people's kitchen table issues. People were worried about schools. They start talking about schools. Do they offer real solutions? No. Do they offer good solutions? No. But they're talking about it, and they're pointing the blame in the Democratic direction. And because the Democrats aren't talking about anything else, they're just taking the hit. I mean, South Carolina is not a pleasant place for people my age to live. It's not, Governor McMaster made it very, very clear that as a gay man, he doesn't believe that I should be able to be married in this state. And I do take issue with that. But that did not stop me today from not voting for Joe Cunningham. I didn't. I wasn't going to do it. I didn't vote for any Republicans, but there were several lines where on my ballot were either skipped or I wrote somebody in or I picked a third party person. And I think that you're going to see a lot of people my age that look like me doing that. I think what's worse is we are consistently seeing Black men somehow finding a home and a voice in the Republican Party. I think Democratic Party, definitely in South Carolina, but nationally, they take the Black vote for granted. I don't think that they should do that anymore. I think that it's extremely dangerous territory for them to do that. I think that they really need to more. They basically took Mia McLeod's campaign and whitewashed her platform and anointed Joe Cunningham king. Well, we see how that turned out. As soon as he said $12 an hour, I knew he was going to lose, because a living wage in South Carolina, a living wage, a true living wage, is $19 an hour. If we can't get you to 15, what are you doing, and why do you think you should be the Democratic nominee for governor? It just doesn't add up. And I agree with Johnny. It's leadership. It's leadership on the national level. I can guarantee, as much respect that I have for them, if Representatives Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn took this session to stand down and hand it over to younger leadership, we probably would have taken some hits tonight, but they wouldn't have been that bad under a Hakeem Jeffries. I'm not asking for an AOC. I'm not asking for an Ilhan Omar. Hakeem Jeffries, a centrist, a Black man, someone that's young, someone that is at least halfway progressive, someone that is popular, someone that you know that is always going to come back to Congress as long as he runs. That's a good option.
Right.
They don't want to give it over. Everybody wants to be selfish, even with the South Carolina party leadership. This is 6 years with Chairman Robertson, and we haven't won a statewide office yet withstanding Lisa Ellis. And if we do win Lisa Ellis's office, I don't think it's because of Democratic effort. I think it's because teachers are desperate and they don't want some psycho that just got a master's degree in 6.5 from the most conservative institution in likely the South to be running schools. It's already bad enough under Henry McMaster. It's just going to get worse if Ellen Weaver wins tonight. But it's been getting worse. It's been getting worse for 20 years. I remember Jim Hodges being in office. I was alive and I was young. I was in elementary school, but I remember that. I remember Inez Tenenbaum. I remember Jim Rex. So I know it's possible to elect a Democrat statewide in South Carolina. I know it is. But it's not going to happen unless you wake up the base, and you're not going to wake up the base by telling them what you think their issues should be, telling them why you think they should go to the poll. You have to listen to them to figure out what is going to get them to the polls, and not just say that you're going to do it and talk it up, but then actually show up and do it. Democrats don't have a good track record of doing that. And honestly, as messed up as the promises are, Republicans do. If Republicans say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. When it was time to block Merrick Garland's nomination, blocked. When it was time to get Amy Coney Barrett put on the Supreme Court, it was done. And that's why Lindsey Graham took the election last year. He said he was going to do something. He did it, and it was up. I think Democrats have to figure out what it is that they're going to do and figure it out quick, because as they continue to say all week, democracy is at stake and the ball's in their court as a minority party, likely.
Okay. This computer screen. Look at the computer screen. Hold on, we have some technical what is
I can hear you, Mike. You're just not.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. For some reason, the screen is frozen. That's interesting. Johnny. Well, let me say this. This election cycle was the first time when I voted, I did a write-in. I did a write-in for at least two candidates, and I'll be honest. One of those was the governor's race. I personally did not feel Joe Cunningham. I don't even think he tried to reach African American voters. And Dr. Cordero, you've been the chair of the Democratic Black Caucus. I want you to give me some insight here. I just didn't see the outreach. I saw no Cunningham signs in black neighborhoods. Now, in my neighborhood, in the black neighborhoods that I visited during the campaign, I saw no Joe Cunningham signs. I saw no Joe Cunningham paraphernalia, no ads in black media. I saw very little diversity in his campaign. I saw very little diversity in his policies. I don't know what this attempt to legalize marijuana was, that a nod to black voters, because I personally found that offensive. I think it should be legalized, but I think if that's your way of connecting with me as a black voter, I think that's very slack, lackluster, and ill-informed. And I just want to know, with African Americans making up such a large portion of the electorate, especially the Democratic elected in South Carolina.
Michael, you stayed still there with us? Okay, I think Mike's experiencing some technical difficulties, but I think where he was leading Johnny is, with all that said, what is it that the Democrats just are not understanding about the situation?
I think I think you're spot on. First of all, with regard to who they reach out to, I think Michael has made it quite clear, and I think he's right. And that is, you can't. I'm trying to be as delicate as I can. You can't pick candidates for the people. That's not going to work. The people should pick their own candidates. What do I mean by that? I mean that you can't take a candidate and put this candidate up when nobody is, few people are supporting, in particular among the electorate that is most important to you. I don't know. I don't know Joe Cunningham personally. I was at a meeting, and this is, not anecdotal because I was actually there, but I was at a meeting. I think they called it Chop It Up, and this was during the presidential election, and I believe we were in Charleston, and it was a room full of all black men, most of them younger millennials, I guess. I was there, and I'm certainly not a millennial, but I was there as chair of the South Carolina Democratic Black Caucus at the time. And Mr. Cunningham had to leave. And when he left, and I'll never forget this, when he had to leave, he got up and he said, well, I'm sorry, I can't stay longer. Jamie Harrison was there. The chair of the South Carolina, the chair of the DNC at the time, whose name I forget right now, was also there. The one that preceded Jamie Harrison was also there. And when he got up and said, I had to leave, this is Joe Cunningham, he got up and said, I have to leave. He walked around the room and he had his business cards, and he threw his business cards on the table. And that was insulting to me. But in any event, maybe he's just inexperienced. But I can tell you this, when the affair was over, when the meeting was over and we were leaving the room, all of those all of those business cards, Joe Cunningham's business cards, were either left on the desk or had been pushed to the floor. If a person who has to appeal to 70% of the Democratic electorate and does not have the social skills in dealing with other people to understand that that was offensive, then I'm not surprised that, like Michael said, I have not seen any of his signs in my neighborhood. I live in a black neighborhood, black community, or any place that I have gone. The only place I have seen his was out in the area where I work, which is predominantly white area. So my point is this: you will not force us to support somebody who we do not believe in. And the first requirement has to be that you know how to talk to black folks. The first part has to be that you stand for issues that are important to us. If you can't stand in this day and time, if you can't stand for a minimum wage of $15 an issue, as you said, it's more likely 19. I've heard as high as $22 an hour. And if you can't even stand for that, knowing how important, knowing that people are having difficulty financially, and you can't stand for that, you've got problems, okay? The states in the United States are coming around slowly but surely to legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes. You can't stand for that. That means to me that you don't care about what's important to the people who have to elect you. And you believe by I call them the golden boy, you believe by some stroke of magic that you were going to beat McMaster, particularly after you had been a one-term congressman. And I'm not knocking being one term. I'm saying you got there and then they kicked you out. And now you want to run for governor. But that's not Joe Cunningham's fault, because Joe Cunningham should be able to run for any office he wants to. I don't begrudge him that fact. That's why I get back to the leadership aspect of this. The leadership decided who to back. Mia McLeod, as far as I know, got little or no backing. I know that there was a debate that was scheduled with her and Cunningham and the Democratic Party. As I understand that the Democratic Party decided to cancel that, and it was to be on public radio, NPR, and they stopped that. So what I'm saying is that we lack sensitivity. Democrats lack sensitivity, and they're also afraid to be on what someone might call a radical side. Now, here's the last thing I'm going to say about this. It seems common sense to me, and I hope it will to everyone else, that if you follow one route and that leads you in the wrong direction, common sense tells you got to turn around and start going in the other direction. But more importantly, even if you are a stickler for that and you decide to stay on that course, here's the question. If you stay on this course and lose, what do you lose if you decide to take another course and still lose? You're still losing. So damn it, excuse me, at some point you got to understand this is not working. And if you think the other, give it a shot. They're not intent on doing that. And this for me is key. And the key is this. I've said it before and I'll continue to say it. In South Carolina and in politics generally, there is big money in losing. You can lose repeatedly and still keep the purse. And the perfect example of that, of course, in fact, a historical example of that is Jamie Harrison. Raised more money than anybody in history and still lost, but became chair of the DNC. So that's my take on it. I hope we will learn. And more importantly, as I understand what you've done, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. What I understand that you have done, Camden, is to take a more independent approach. And perhaps it's time for us to say that it's not Democrat, it's not Republican, it's us and our interests, our concerns, and we should always vote and support those interests and those concerns. And our vote should go to the party, regardless, the person, regardless of party, who addresses the issues that speak to our issues. And those are the people we should support, because Democrats have very often taken us for granted, as you so well said.
Yeah, I don't think it can get any plainer than that. It really is a pity, because I think that people in South Carolina, they want something different. They, especially people my age, they want something very, very different. But nobody's listening to us. Nobody is hearing us out. And as far as me being an independent now, I feel a freedom over my mental health, if I'm honest about it. I really hold that our people, specifically the Black community, we're being held hostage in a very abusive relationship with the Democratic Party, which doesn't make sense because we're the majority of the Democratic Party.
70% in South Carolina.
So it doesn't make sense. But if we don't take hold of it and really give it some direction, and not just when it's time for our votes, do we need to start getting people to take hold of it? But when you start talking about precincts, we need to take hold of that system now. You know,
when I ran for chair of the party, that was basically what I was saying. We need to expend our resources and at the precinct level, because that's where it all starts at. And we should come from the precinct up. And we'd also have a round table where everybody, it's a collective leadership. You said that it doesn't make sense, and I would agree with that. But let me just put a different switch coverage on it. If it is true that it doesn't make sense, then is it possible that there is a way that it does make sense that we're not really looking at or paying attention to? And I maintain that there is. And the way it makes sense is I can keep pulling in millions of dollars. The South Carolina Democratic Party, I did a count not too long ago. The South Carolina Democratic Party has picked up since in the last 20, 25 years, somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 million. Where'd the money go? Okay, so if I can pull in vast sums of money, okay, whether I win or lose, losing doesn't become so bad, because I can buy a new headquarters. I can spend the money where I think it needs to be spent, and with little accounting, other than to the FEC regulations, but little accounting, and so I make money, and I still lose. That's where the sense of it is, because it doesn't make any difference whether I win or lose, because I'm making the money. So the only way you can get around that from the party standpoint is for the party to understand that, hey, if you have a bad season, you're out of here, just like you would if you were a coach in football. And when we understand that, when we focus on that, and then the all-important thing, and this is really what hurts, I believe, in South Carolina, is the failure to recognize that you're not going to do it without the Black vote, but you're also not going to do it without young people. Understand that emphasis should not be on voter registration, get out the vote. Young folks are by and large registered to vote. They're just not voting, and they're not voting, and I can understand why. So address those issues, get young folks like yourself who must become part of the party. You can't keep putting the same people back in office doing the same thing, and nobody but nobody is entitled to a job for life. That's it.
Let me ask you this before we get into some of the updates, because there are some more projections coming in.
Okay.
But you mentioned the endorsement earlier. Representative Clyburn endorsing Biden is what gave him the momentum and launched him through the primary. Is tonight any type of referendum on that decision?
Okay, good, excellent question. Okay, first of all, for those who don't know, I did not support Joe Biden. I supported another candidate. However, when he became the nominee, I then supported him and voted for him. And as much as people may think it hypocritical of me because not supporting him originally, what I do say is this: Joe Biden has done, in my humble estimation, Joe Biden has done a decent job as president of the United States. He's put money in people's pockets, and he's done. Now, the things that go against him are really not his fault. He doesn't really control inflation. He doesn't control gas prices and all that kind of thing. And that's where people are hurting. So for what he's done so far, I think that was better. And look what the alternative was. The alternative was number 45, and nobody wants him again. So for that, I can't hold that against Joe Biden. So was the endorsement right? The endorsement, I believe, should have went to someone else. And I believe that someone else probably would have done a better job. But what we're really up against here, and this is what people have to understand, what we're really up against here, we're up against a conservative Supreme Court. We're up against 12 circuit courts of appeals, most of them also conservative. And 200 district courts, roughly. 154 of them were district court judges that were appointed by 45. I'm sorry, I just refuse to say this man's name. Were appointed by 45. So that's what we're really up against, and that is not controlled by Joe Biden. I do believe, however, if Joe Biden gets what he needs, and that is majority in the House, majority in the Senate, I do believe that he can make change. Now, as far as the endorsement was concerned, the endorsement was, whether I like it or not, the endorsement was the politically right thing to do. Got to give it to him. Clyburn is a consummate politician. It was the right thing to do politically. Okay. Now, implied in your question is whether or not we should continue down that road or whether that was a mistake. I would have rather seen it gone another way, but I think as things have happened. And the other thing that we got to remember is that one of the things they're holding against Joe Biden right now is that he's caused inflation by the money that they gave to to not young people, it's the money to help to bail people out. But nobody talks about in 2008 when they bailed out the banks with trillions of dollars of loans to bail out the banks of monies that they didn't, some paid back and some did not. But in any event, nobody complained when that happened. So what Joe Biden has done is putting some money in people's pockets, whether it's temporary or not. It was, people appreciated it, I'm sure. So I don't know if I've answered your question, and I'm sorry if I was rambling. But so I although I don't agree with what Clyburn did, I do think it was the politically best thing for him to do.
No, I can respect that, and like I said, I think in totality, Representative Clyburn is very much worthy of respect. I don't think that you get to be a kingmaker by just sitting on your hands for 30 years. I think that the reason why his words held weight is because there has been a record of consistency with the people in his district and across the state.
My problem in that regard is, and I say this to anybody who will listen, nobody deserves a job for life. 30 years is too long for you to be in office. There's a reason why they created the House of Representatives for 2-year turnarounds, and you could run as often as possible, of course, but it was on a 2-year basis. Every 2 years you go back. The reason for that was to ensure that we had turnover. If we don't have turnover, young people will never get in office. What are you going to wait another 30 years before you can get in office? That should not be the case. Clearly, we should have term limits. You got term limits for the president of the United States, but a House of Representatives, he can be there forever. Nobody deserves a job for life. So that's my main argument with regard to people staying in office too long.
Well, welcome back, Mike. We were just going to get into some updates on some of the races, how they're going right now. I'm starting with the superintendent of education race in South Carolina. 43% reporting Lisa Ellis is down by 6 points. About 43,000 votes. She's missing right now, but it's 43% reporting. I think that there might be some room out there for her. She has to find it pretty quick. I'm also looking at the Pennsylvania race that you were asking about, Johnny. 61% and John Fetterman is up by 3 points, 50-47. He is doing good. I know that he was kind of getting a little bit of a bad rap there for a second because of some of the health issues that he's been having. Also, something that is. Oh, go ahead.
Just quickly, do you think that Oprah Winfrey's remarks, observations about Fetterman the other day helped him in any way? Do you know what she said?
I'm not sure. Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. Okay. I mean, Oprah is Oprah. We cannot deny her that.
And of course, Oz, in a real sense, Oz is where he is because of his her support, not her support, but her giving him the start that got him going. And she came back and said, that she was voting for Fetterman, and she has for a whole host of reasons. So anyway, I just want to see what you thought about that. Go ahead.
And two really important House races. First and foremost, and a governor race that I'll talk about here in a second. But the Republican Party has unseated a January 6th committee member, Elaine Luria, the Democrat from, I believe, Virginia. She is out. Also, the state of Pennsylvania, while they are working on the Senate race, they have elected the first Black woman that will be going to Congress to represent Pennsylvania. Democrat Summer Lee has won her race. Right. And the Texas governor race has been called for Greg Abbott.
Okay. All right. Any updates on the school board? I was checking for updates on the school board. We had a very, very contentious race for Richland 2 in Richland County, and that's been interesting to see. There has I don't know if you guys have been following Dr. Kadira. You may have been. You're in Richland County. That there's been a lot ever since COVID. There's been a concerted effort by I don't want to say Republicans, but right, conservative extremists. I will say this: to co-opt school boards. Do you have any knowledge of what's going on or what's driving that? Dr. Cadero?
Not really, and I'm ashamed to say that I'm woefully ignorant as regards that race, and that, and I know I shouldn't say this, but I'm just being honest, is that my kids are grown and long out of school. And it's not that I don't care about it, but I've always believed that the people who should be most interested in those elections are people who have children, who have skin in the game, who have children in school. In fact, I think that those people who want that position, who do not have children in school, um, I question what your reason for running is. So no, I've never actually, I don't actually follow that long, since all of my kids are grown and have grown kids of their own. So I have to beg out on that one. I'm sorry.
Okay. We talked an awful lot about what the party in South Carolina isn't doing. How do we make it better? Camden, how do we make it better? How do we do
Well, there was a study that was done that I was told about as soon as I got into Young Democrats in South Carolina in 2 years. Apparently, if there are 50 to 80%, if there's 50 to 80% voter turnout from young people ages 18 to 39, then tomorrow South Carolina can go as blue as Colorado. So I think that the South Carolina Democratic Party's first step is figuring out what it is going to take to get people of that age out to the poll. And what it's going to take is higher minimum wage. What it's going to take is, honestly, at some point, because, and I'll say that, some of them, to your point, Johnny, I think they try to consider things as radical leftists, but like concepts like rent control. But let's talk about it. In a state that without the national law, the minimum wage would be $5. Why is the average rent for a 2-bedroom like $1,700, $1,800 a month? These things don't add up. So now, because it's been allowed to get that bad, it might require something drastic and radical like rent control. But that's not the people's problems that are asking for solutions like that. That is the fact that people have allowed it to get that bad. I think a lot of it is going to have to deal with money. It's going to have to deal with making an economy that actually works for all people. And I think that you'll find a lot of those solutions in state solutions. Like, okay, the country's not going to go to a single payer system. Let's start talking about one in South Carolina. If South Carolina is this and South Carolina is that, and we can progress in all these ways, let's find a way to make sure that everybody in South Carolina has access to healthcare. Let's find a way to make sure that everybody in South Carolina has access to some sort of housing. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go out and pay for everybody, but it does mean that we are going to have to put some creative solutions forward to solve the problems that people care about, especially if we want things around South Carolina to look like Colorado, to where you can elect a gay black man, not a gay black man, but a gay man as governor twice in a row. You're going to have to come with some Colorado Democratic policy. Legalizing marijuana. I don't know why that's not, like you said, Johnny. I don't know why that's not like the key thing on everybody's agenda. I think it's wrong to utilize that as a key black issue. You think if you throw legalization of marijuana at black people, they're automatically going to come show up for you. That's not how that works. But
No,
they will definitely come show up for state colleges that are tuition free. And you know what? The proof is already in that. McMaster did it with technical colleges. He's still pumping money into technical colleges. And people, I think that might have been another thing that hurt Joe Cunningham today. You can't thank Democrats for the free tuition programs that are going on at South Carolina technical schools. They don't do anything. They don't have a voice. And the little voice that they do use, they spend pontificating about stuff that people my age don't care about. But the ability to go to school and really study, to get a career, to get a certification, to get training on a job that can pay you a living wage and a comfortable wage in South Carolina, you will get people's attention with that. So if young voters, if McMaster's young vote increased from last election, that might be a reason why. But I think South Carolina Democrats, they have to jump on the ball to things that are actually important to their voting base. I think there's not really another solution. There's nothing else that they can do but that.
Dr. Kadira, what are your thoughts? How we make the party better?
There are internal things that need to be changed. That is within the party itself. And there are things that the party must recognize that need to be done externally. So just to address the external portions of it first, this is a state that is a right to work state. Problem, big problem. Why will people not understand that the fact that the employer has the right to fire you for no reason and you have the right to quit for no reason? How do we think that's an equivalency in any way possible? The second thing is the reason, because for that, we don't have unions. The reason that we have such low salaries in South Carolina is because there are no unions, virtually no unions to speak of, who are fighting for us. So those are systemic things that we need to address. Now, in order to do that, we need a party that's fighting, a party that that continues to lose, okay, but is afraid to try something else. It makes absolutely no sense to me. So what does the South Carolina Democratic Party need to do? South Carolina Democratic Party needs to understand first and foremost where their strength is. Their strength actually is in the precincts. They have to start addressing their issues and financing and giving resources to the precincts. Those are the ones who are really in touch, or the so-called grassroots people. That's where it is, in the precinct. Two, we have to make sure that there's transparency. We have to be able to see where the money is going, and we need to be able to ensure that our money is used. And when I say the money, I mean the money that's given to the party, that money is used correctly. Also, the Democratic Party has to open up its doors and now have what I call a collective leadership approach, whereby everybody is part of the process. We sit down at a big round table and we figure out what needs to be done. The second thing is the next thing is that the Democratic Party has to recognize where its strength is. There's no way in the world that you can lead an organization or have an organization that's 70% black and do not have black issues on the forefront. Now, the thing is that this party moves that way in terms of fundamental fairness. We address the issues that affect white folks and black folks because, frankly, the difficulty or the problems that are confronting the African-American community also are confronting the white community. So all we're looking for is fundamental fairness. But the party has got to be a party that recognizes where its strength is and plays to that strength. So now, does that mean leaving other people out? No. Everybody should recognize that it's got to be a coalition. We need allies. Everybody needs to be fighting together in the same force. But I think that what happens is that we fail to address the greatest number of our people. And if we continue to do that, we will continue to lose. Why? Because young African Americans, first and foremost, and then young people are really the coming backbone of the Democratic Party or politics generally, is the millennials. You guys are taking over. It's going to be yours one way or the other. The third thing really is that we have to recognize that among African Americans within the South Carolina Democratic Party, the most reliable voters are African American females. A female was running for office and you didn't support her. I don't care what anybody says, you didn't support her. I've seen the South Carolina Democratic Party, in effect, go by neglect or by intent, remove black women who are in leadership positions within the South Carolina Democratic Party, and that has got to stop. You can't continue to take your base for granted, and everyone knows that. The South Carolina Democratic Party has turned out to be what I like to refer to as Republican light. They're trying so hard not to be called Democrats, and what I mean by that is they don't want to be branded radicals, don't want to be branded leftists, don't want to be branded anything that's in favor of what we need in the black community, because for fear that they will run white folks away. If you go straight down the middle, and if you go for fundamental fairness, the things that address African American issues will also address the majority of white folks' issues as well. In brief.
All right. And it is almost 11 o'clock, and I think it's time to wrap this up. But definitely enjoy you all. But before I let you go, it's one thing. I saw a comment come on, and I can't find it now because we're streaming to 5 different locations. But the question that arose, let me see. One of the myths that some Democrats have in South Carolina, and this is what the comment was saying, is that a lot of white Democrats, not all, but some white Democrats feel that if I run a semi-quote moderate campaign, that I will somehow reach these Republican light voters. So in my experience, I got that vibe from the whole Cunningham, like the comment was saying, I got that whole vibe from Cunningham. Like it's always a constant search for this unicorn, these Republican light voters in South Carolina that South Carolina Democratic Party candidates have been trying to reach for 16 years and losing. And I call them unicorns because I really don't think they exist. But
it's because that's their standard of practice now. When I was working on a congressional campaign in 2020, they told the candidate that I was working with to don't worry about knocking on Democratic doors. They're coming, period. 100%. Go out into these purple districts and pull independent voters, pull Republican voters. My candidate was if we're going to put a marker on it, she was the most leftist person running for Congress in the state at that point. That wasn't going to work for her. How do you think a Greenville or Spartanburg Republican is going to take to someone coming and knocking on their door to discuss universal health care in 2020? It didn't go well. And it went okay for her because she did get the highest amount of votes, but turnout was a little bit higher as well. I don't think it was because people switched sides. There was enough of a point difference to tell that they didn't switch sides. They were intent on voting for who they were going to vote for. I knew Democrats that were voting for the Republican candidate, not because they didn't believe in the candidate's platform, but get this, because they did not know that a Democrat was running in their area.
How is that possible?
Well, the way that it's possible was leadership in the state and the Democratic Party here promised me a robocall from an already elected congressman. I'm still waiting on that robocall. It never happened because the investment isn't in the upstate. The investment isn't in people that are actually within the base. The Republican Party does not sacrifice its own base to go out and get leftist Democrats. They don't have to. They have their own value system, their own party line that they ride on. If you're about it, you're about it. We're going to sell you on the point until we win the election, period. And because they do that and they perform when they are in power, they can get what they want. They get what they want in South Carolina. And from the looks of it, with now Ron Johnson and Herschel Walker being ahead and about 80% reporting in these races, they might be getting what they want.
Mm-hmm. And you know, the sad thing about it is that how in the world could you possibly think that people who deny the January 6th insurrection, who denied that Biden won the election, how can you possibly think you are ever going to say anything to those people that's going to bring them across? And they're entitled to their opinion, certainly, it's entitled to their views, but that's a fool's errand. You're not doing anything. Another thing, I believe this for the Democratic Party is there's an old saying my grandma used to have. She said, you got to you got to dance with the one that brung you. And if you don't dance with the one you brung you, guess what? She or he ain't coming to the party with you no more. And that's where we are now. It's going to take time to do it. And Camden, I just want to take off my hat to you. I believe that your movement toward or joining with independence, and I use that sparingly. You define yourself, I don't. But to recognize that we're throwing good votes after bad votes with the Democrats at this point in time, I think speaks volumes to what I anticipate is going to happen very shortly on the part of young folks, millennials, if you will. I'm really sure what that age right is, but that we're going to see. And I still believe with all my heart that if change is really going to come in this country, it's going to come at your hands and at the hands of people at your age bracket and people who are as politically savvy as you are. So I take my hat off to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, it's now 11 o'clock. Camden, Dr. Cordero, thank you for joining me, Camden. Thank you for putting this together. I really appreciate it. That's gave some insights. You brought up some good points, and I definitely hope we can do this again. We definitely need to reconvene with some more people to discuss moving forward. After we had an opportunity to look at all the election results and see where we stand in this country and in this state, and how do we move forward with not just with Black people or with Democrats, but policies that benefit all people. Thank you guys, and good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.